The night was vast, an endless shroud of darkness pierced only by the twin moons hanging low over the horizon. The track stretched on, gleaming under the artificial light of a train that roared toward its destination, unstoppable, indifferent. Ethan crouched low, his heart hammering against his ribs. The plasma cutter in his trembling hands hummed to life, its glow casting flickering shadows across the steel rails. He had minutes, maybe seconds, before the train reached them. "Get away," the woman snarled, violet eyes burning with fury despite the sweat slicking her deep purple skin. "You cannot save me, human." Ethan ignored her, his fingers tightening around the hilt of the cutter. He had seen death too many times to let this one happen in front of him. The shackles binding her wrists and ankles weren't ordinary restraints. Heavy, reinforced, whoever had chained her here wanted to make sure she wouldn't leave. The shriek of the train horn ripped through the air, drowning out the sound of his own pulse. He worked faster, slicing through the first shackle, its molten edges glowing orange in the night. Come on," he muttered, feeling the vibration of the approaching engine in the soles of his boots. Kaia hissed, trying to pull away. "You don't understand it." "No, you don't understand." Ethan snapped back, eyes flashing up to hers. "I don't leave people to die. So either shut up and help, or let me work." Her expression flickered for a moment. Then, against her better judgment, she did as he asked. The second shackle melted under the cutter's heat. The train was seconds away now, its headlights searing against the dark, a wall of metal and fury barreling toward them. Ethan yanked her forward with all his strength. The last restraint snapped. With a final desperate lunge, he pulled Kaia off the tracks just as the train screamed past. The force of the wind sent them both sprawling into the gravel. Ethan slammed into an old track switch, pain jolting through his ribs. A second later, Kaia crashed into him, breathless, her body rigid with tension. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The train roared on, oblivious to the lives it had nearly claimed. Its lights disappeared into the distance, leaving only the echo of its passing. Ethan let his head fall back against the cold metal. "Holy shit," he panted. Kaia stirred against him. Then, without warning, she shoved him backward, eyes blazing. "What the hell were you thinking?" she snapped. He coughed, trying to regain his breath. "Oh, I'm sorry. Was I supposed to let you get smeared across half this planet?" Her hands curled into fists. There was a tremor in them, but whether from fear, pain, or rage, he couldn't tell. "You don't understand," she muttered, sitting back. "They were going to come back for me." Ethan frowned. "Who?" Kaia turned her head toward the horizon. That's when he heard it, the distant hum of engines. Low. Mechanical. Approaching. His muscles tensed. A row of red lights flickered against the night sky, moving fast. "Friends of yours?" Ethan asked, though he already knew the answer. She didn't look at him. Her voice was quiet, almost resigned. "They're coming to kill us both." The ground trembled beneath them, the mechanical growl growing louder with each passing second. Ethan's grip tightened around his blaster. His pulse hammered in his throat. Next to him, Kaia still breathed hard from her near-death experience, but her gaze was locked onto the advancing lights. "Who are they?" he asked, keeping his voice low. Kaia's violet eyes darkened. "Dominion hunters." Ethan exhaled sharply. "Fantastic." The first hoverbike crested the ridge, its black frame reflecting the moonlight. A masked rider leaned forward, raising a long-barreled rifle. Ethan reacted on instinct. He grabbed Kaia's wrist and yanked her behind a rusted-out train car just as a shot rang out, sizzling past his ear. The metal behind them exploded in a shower of sparks. Kaia jerked her arm free. "Don't touch me." "The next time, I'll let you take the bullet," Ethan muttered, peering around the wreckage. The train yard stretched for miles, littered with derailed cars and broken tracks. They had cover, but not much. "We need to move," Kaia said. "No kidding." Another shot punched through the steel next to his head, spraying molten fragments. Ethan cursed. "All right. New plan. Run first, argue later." Kaia didn't protest. They bolted, weaving between rusted train cars as the hunters spread out. More bikes roared over the ridge, kicking up clouds of dust. Ethan fired a few blind shots over his shoulder. A scream followed, but he didn't stop to check if it was a kill. Kaia grabbed his arm, yanking him left. "This way." A bullet struck the ground inches from his boot. "Anytime you want to explain why you've got an entire death squad after you, I'm all ears," Ethan shouted as they vaulted over a pile of twisted rails. Later, figures in sleek dark armor dismounted their bikes, moving in formation. A voice crackled through a communicator. "Target is mobile. Cut them off." Ethan cursed. He could hear the whine of energy weapons charging. If they got pinned, They were dead. They rounded a wrecked train car and skidded to a stop. A steep drop stretched before them, an old ravine, its floor jagged with scrap metal and debris. Kaia glanced over her shoulder. The hunters were closing in. Ethan's gut twisted. "You're not about to suggest." She grabbed his shirt and shoved him. Air rushed past his ears as he plummeted. He crashed down, rolling through dirt and wreckage, limbs burning from the impact. A second later, Kaia landed beside him far more gracefully, barely making a sound. Ethan groaned, pushing himself up. "I hate you." She didn't dignify that with a response. Above them, the hunters reached the edge. One aimed down. Ethan fired first. His blaster's energy bolt struck the soldier in the chest, sending him toppling back with a strangled cry. Kaia seized Ethan's arm. "Move." They scrambled over twisted wreckage, slipping between old cargo crates and shattered train parts. "You got an exit strategy, or are we just hoping they get bored?" Ethan asked. Kaia glanced at a derelict tunnel ahead. There. The tunnel gaped like a mouth carved into the earth, its interior shrouded in darkness. It looked abandoned. Forgotten. "You sure?" A grenade arced toward them. Ethan tackled Kaia, throwing them both behind a heap of metal as the explosion shook the ravine. Heat seared his back. He lifted his head, coughing through the dust. That, he wheezed, was too close. Kaia was already up, eyes scanning. "They'll be on us in seconds." The hunters slid down the ravine walls, rifles raised. No more time. Kaia grabbed his wrist and pulled him toward the tunnel. Ethan didn't resist. They sprinted into the dark, leaving the Dominion hunters behind. The tunnel swallowed them whole. The dim emergency strips lining the walls flickered weakly, casting erratic shadows against the rusted metal. Ethan ran on instinct, his breath ragged, the weight of exhaustion pressing against his ribs. Kaia moved ahead of him, her violet eyes sharp even in the gloom, every step calculated. Behind them, the Dominion hunters pursued, their bow falls echoing like gunfire against the steel flooring. A voice, cold and unwavering, crackled over their comms. "Target is inside. Seal the exits." Ethan's gut twisted. That doesn't sound promising. Kaia didn't break stride. "They're trying to trap us. Keep moving." The tunnel stretched ahead, a cavernous maw of darkness. Faint outlines of old service doors flickered past as they ran, sealed tight, useless. Then, a mechanical screech tore through the air. Ethan stole a glance over his shoulder and cursed. A bulkhead was sliding down behind them, thick and reinforced, cutting off their retreat. Shit. He pushed himself harder, legs burning as he sprinted after Kaia. She saw it too. "Faster," she shouted. Ethan dug deep, every muscle screaming as they lunged forward. The bulkhead slammed down. They barely made it through. Ethan felt the rush of air as the steel door crushed the space behind him, sealing shut with a deafening finality. He landed hard, rolling across the grated floor before crashing against a rusted service panel. Kaia stumbled but recovered instantly, her body coiled like a predator ready to strike. Silence filled the tunnel, thick and suffocating. Ethan lay there for a moment, gasping. That sucked. Kaia ignored him. Her focus was on the bulkhead, her jaw tight. "They're locking us in." Ethan pushed himself up, wincing. "Guess we better find another way out." She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You still have a choice, human. Leave me. They won't waste time chasing you." Ethan scoffed. "You really think I'm going to walk away now?" She studied him for a beat, then exhaled. "Then we move." The tunnel stretched deeper into the earth, narrowing as it sloped downward. The flickering lights grew fewer, the silence heavier. Ethan tightened his grip on his blaster. "Tell me there's an exit at the end of this." Kaia didn't answer immediately. "Then, there should be." Ethan groaned. "Not the confidence boost I was hoping for." They kept moving, their footsteps muted against the steel grating. The further they went, the colder the air became, the scent of rust and decay thickening. Then, movement. Kaia froze, her body going rigid. Ethan stopped beside her, gripping his weapon. "What is it?" She didn't answer. Instead, she lifted a hand, signaling for silence. A low clicking sound echoed from the darkness ahead. Rhythmic. Unnatural. Ethan's pulse quickened. "That's not Dominion," he murmured. Kaia's grip tightened around the blade at her side. "No, it's worse." The clicking grew louder. Closer. Then, out of the shadows, something moved. A glint of silver. A flash of serrated limbs. Ethan barely had time to react before it launched. The creature struck fast. A blur of chitinous armor and razor-edged limbs, its elongated form rippling with unnatural speed. Ethan dove sideways as Kaia met the attack head-on. Her blade flashed, slicing through the air. Sparks flew as it struck hardened plating, the impact sending vibrations up her arm. The creature screeched, a sound that rattled through the tunnel like a swarm of insects. Ethan fired. The shot hit center mass. The thing barely flinched. "Not good," he muttered, backing up. Kaia pivoted, dodging a slashing limb as she countered with a brutal strike to its exposed underbelly. This time, the blade sank in. The creature recoiled, a thick, black substance oozing from the wound. "Keep moving," Kaia ordered. Ethan didn't argue. They sprinted down the corridor, the walls narrowing around them as more clicking sounds echoed from the dark. "Tell me that was the only one," Ethan panted. Kaia's silence was not reassuring. A new sound rumbled from the depths ahead, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the floor beneath them. Then, the tunnel opened up. Ethan skidded to a stop. Before them stretched an enormous subterranean chamber, its walls lined with the remnants of ancient machinery, rusted pipes, shattered consoles, and massive storage tanks covered in thick, pulsing webbing. And within that webbing, bodies. Rows of figures suspended in a grotesque stasis. Some were alien. Some were human. Ethan's stomach turned. "What the hell is this?" Kaia's expression darkened. "A feeding ground." The clicking intensified. Ethan turned just in time to see dozens of those creatures emerging from the darkness, crawling down the walls, slithering across the floor, their obsidian-like bodies gleaming in the dim light. They weren't just hunting. They had been waiting. Kaia's grip on her weapon tightened. "We run." Ethan swallowed. "That's the first smart thing you've said all night." Then, the creatures attacked. They ran. Ethan fired wildly over his shoulder, each shot illuminating the grotesque nightmare behind them. The creatures moved like liquid shadows, their elongated forms shifting unnaturally. Kaia kept ahead, leading them toward an old stairwell corroded with age. "Up," she commanded. Ethan didn't hesitate. He scrambled after her, his boots slipping against rusted metal as he pulled himself up the steps two at a time. Below, the creatures shrieked, their twisted limbs clawing at the stairs, the webbing around them shuddering as if something much larger was waking beneath it. Kaia vaulted onto a platform, spinning to slice through the closest pursuer. Its screech was cut short as her blade severed its head. Ethan reached her side. "Tell me there's a way out up here." Kaia scanned the platform, her eyes locking onto a half-buried control panel beneath a thick layer of webbing. She slashed it free and slammed her hand against the cracked screen. A series of ancient symbols flickered. "Come on," she muttered. Behind them, the swarm climbed. Then, a door groaned open. A rush of cold, fresh air hit them. Ethan didn't ask questions. He grabbed Kaia's wrist and pulled her through the opening just as the creatures lunged. The steel hatch slammed shut behind them. For a moment, silence. Then, the distant, muffled screeches of the creatures, trapped. Ethan collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. Kaia exhaled, resting her hands on her knees. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, finally, "We're not out yet," Kaia said. Ethan sighed. "You're really bad at pep talks." She straightened, her violet eyes flickering toward the towering structure in the distance. "That's because I don't believe in hope." Ethan followed her gaze. The Dominion citadel loomed against the horizon. And somewhere inside, Rian was waiting. The wind howled across the barren expanse, carrying the scent of ozone and distant fires. The Dominion citadel loomed ahead, an imposing structure of black steel and monolithic towers that jutted into the sky like the bones of some forgotten god. Ethan wiped the sweat from his brow, his body aching from their escape. Beside him, Kaia was silent, her violet eyes locked on the fortress with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You got a plan," he said, voice rough. It wasn't a question. Kaia exhaled slowly. "We get inside, we find my brother, and we end this." Ethan scoffed. "Oh yeah, simple. Just waltz in, kill the psycho running this whole nightmare, and walk back out. Easy day." Kaia turned to him, her face unreadable. "You should leave." Ethan crossed his arms. "And miss all the fun." "You don't owe me anything, human," she said quietly. He frowned. "I saved your life. I think that makes this my fight too." Kaia studied him for a long moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. "Then we do this together." Chapter 7. The Infiltration. The citadel was a fortress surrounded by high-energy barriers and patrolled by Dominion soldiers in sleek, obsidian armor. Every entrance was fortified, every access point monitored. But Kaia knew its weaknesses. "We go through the service tunnels," she whispered as they crouched behind a ridge of jagged rock. "They run beneath the main structure." "Unused. Forgotten." Ethan raised a brow. "Sounds suspiciously convenient." Kaia's lips curved slightly. "Only if you don't know where to look." Under the cover of darkness, they made their way toward a narrow crevice in the rock, hidden behind the remains of an old crash site. Kaia knelt, brushing dust from an embedded hatch. She pressed her palm against a worn panel. A soft click echoed, followed by the hiss of depressurization as the hatch unlocked. Ethan gave a low whistle. "And here I thought breaking into an alien death fortress would be hard." Kaia shot him a look. "Try to keep up, human." They slipped inside, the tunnel swallowing them whole. The passageway stretched before them, dimly lit by flickering maintenance lights. The air was stale, thick with the scent of dust and old metal. Kaia moved ahead, silent and precise. Ethan followed, his blaster ready. "You've been here before," he murmured. Kaia didn't look at him. "I grew up here." Ethan frowned. "With your brother?" Her jaw tightened. Rian wasn't always like this. Once, he was different. Loyal. Kind. Ethan snorted. "Yeah, well, people change." She didn't answer. They reached a junction where the tunnel split into 3 directions. Kaia hesitated. Ethan noticed. "You don't know which way to go." Kaia exhaled sharply. "It's been a long time." Before Ethan could respond, a voice crackled through hidden speakers, sharp and too familiar. "Sister, you never were good at hiding." Kaia froze. Ethan felt the air shift, tension coiling like a spring. "Rian." The sound of boots against metal echoed through the tunnel. Then, Dominion soldiers emerged, sleek armor gleaming in the dim light, weapons raised. "A trap." Ethan lifted his blaster, shifting closer to Kaia. "Well, guess we skipped the hard part." Rian's voice was smooth, amused. "Surrender, and I promise I'll make it painless." Kaia's grip on her blade tightened. "No," she said. Then she attacked. Kaia moved like lightning. Her blade cut through the air, a blur of silver against black armor. The first Dominion soldier fell before he could fire, his weapon clattering to the ground. Ethan fired next, his blaster bolt punching through another soldier's visor. Rian's voice remained infuriatingly calm. "Still fighting? You always did cling to lost causes." Kaia lunged. Rian caught her wrist mid-strike, his golden eyes gleaming. She struggled, but he was stronger. He always had been. "You should have stayed dead," he murmured. Ethan aimed his blaster. Rian moved too fast. A brutal hit sent Ethan crashing against the wall, his vision exploding with white-hot pain. His weapon skittered away. Kaia snarled, twisting free, but Rian was ready. With a swift, calculated movement, he drove a blade into her side. Kaia gasped, staggering backward, her violet eyes wide with shock. Blood dripped onto the floor. Ethan roared, pushing himself up despite the pain. He grabbed the nearest fallen weapon and fired. The blast hit Rian's shoulder, forcing him to retreat. Kaia fell to one knee, her hand pressed against the wound. Rian straightened, golden eyes unreadable. "I could have forgiven you," he said, almost regretful. Kaia's voice was hoarse. "I don't need your forgiveness." Rian exhaled. "Then I'll give you your death instead." He gestured. More soldiers appeared. Ethan grabbed Kaia's arm. "We need to go? Now." She gritted her teeth, eyes flicking between Rian and the encroaching soldiers. Then, reluctantly, she nodded. They ran. Ethan half-carried Kaia as they stumbled through the tunnels, her blood warm against his fingers. "Stay with me," he muttered. Kaia's breath was shallow, her grip weak. "I'm fine." Ethan let out a humorless laugh. "Yeah, sure. You look great." A distant alarm wailed. They weren't alone. Ahead, a docking bay loomed, lined with sleek Dominion ships. Ethan's mind raced. "Can you fly one of those?" Kaia forced herself to stand. "Of course." Ethan shot her a wary glance. "I'm going to pretend I believe that." They sprinted toward the nearest vessel, dodging incoming fire. Kaia slammed a hand against the control panel. The ship hissed to life, its engines flickering. Ethan covered her, firing at the approaching soldiers. Come on, come on." Then, the doors locked. Rian's voice boomed over the comms. "You can't run forever, Kaia." Ethan gritted his teeth. Yeah? Watch us. Kaia yanked a manual override. The cockpit opened. They jumped inside, the ship shuddering beneath them. Strap in, Kaia growled. Ethan barely had time to buckle down before she punched the thrusters. The ship exploded out of the docking bay, racing toward the sky. Dominion fighters pursued. Kaia's hands were steady, her body taut with focus. Ethan could only watch as she angled the ship sharply, weaving through enemy fire. This isn't over, he muttered. Kaia's violet eyes burned. No, she said. It's just beginning. The ship tore through the upper atmosphere, the hull trembling from the gravitational pull of the Dominion citadel below. The stars stretched out before them, cold and unfeeling, as the pursuing fighters closed in. Ethan braced himself against the seat, gripping the safety harness with white-knuckled hands. Tell me you know how to outfly those bastards. Kaia's violet eyes flickered across the ship's controls, fingers moving with practiced precision. They trained me to hunt. They didn't expect me to use it to escape. Ethan wasn't sure if that was a yes or a no, but considering that Kaia was bleeding out in the pilot's seat and they had a fleet of Dominion fighters on their tail, he wasn't feeling particularly optimistic. The comms crackled. Kaia. Rian's voice. Cold. Calculated. Unrelenting. Kaia exhaled sharply, her grip tightening on the controls. You always had potential, he continued, but you never knew your place. Ethan reached for the weapon panel, activating the ship's turret system. Do these work? Kaia's lips pressed into a thin line. If they didn't, we'd already be dead. Ethan took that as an invitation to fire. The ship's cannons roared, streaks of energy tearing through the void. One Dominion fighter erupted in flames, spiraling into the planet's atmosphere. The others didn't falter. Rian's voice remained calm. Your place was beside me, Kaia. You should have let me save you. Kaia's jaw clenched. I don't need saving. She jerked the controls sharply, sending the ship into a dizzying spin. The gravitational force slammed Ethan against the seat, stealing his breath. The Dominion fighters pursued, their weapons glowing ominously. Kaia's breathing was uneven now, the wound in her side bleeding through her flight suit. Ethan's stomach tightened. You're losing too much blood. Kaia didn't look at him. If I slow down, we die. Ethan cursed under his breath. This wasn't going to end well. The Dominion ships were closing in fast, their formation tightening. Kaia's hands trembled, her vision swimming. The edges of her consciousness flickered like a failing light. Rian's voice filled the cockpit once more. You can't run forever, sister. You know that. Kaia's fingers hovered over the hyperdrive controls. She could barely keep focus, but she had one shot. Hold on, she whispered. Ethan barely had time to react before she punched the hyperdrive. The ship lurched. The stars blurred into streaks of silver and blue. The Dominion fighters fell away, unable to track them. Ethan gasped for air, the pressure in his chest finally releasing as the ship stabilized. They had escaped. Barely. Kaia slumped forward, her breath ragged. The blood loss was catching up to her. Ethan unbuckled himself and moved fast, pressing a hand to her wound. Stay with me. Kaia's eyelids fluttered. I'm fine. You're a terrible liar. Ethan muttered, reaching for the ship's medkit. He pulled out a vial of healing serum, the same kind Kaia had used on him before. The silver liquid shimmered under the dim emergency lights. Kaia's lips curled faintly. You better hope that's the right dose, human. Ethan exhaled, pressing the serum into her wound. If it's not, I guess we'll find out together. Kaia winced, her fingers curling into the seat. But the serum worked fast. Within seconds, the bleeding slowed. The color returned to her face. Ethan slumped back. That was a bad idea. Kaia looked at him, her violet eyes sharp despite the exhaustion. But we survived. Ethan laughed, breathless, relieved. Yeah, we did. For now. The ship drifted in hyperspace, the hum of the engines the only sound. Ethan sat against the cold metal wall of the cockpit, his blaster resting at his side. Kaia was quiet, staring at the navigation screen. Rian wouldn't stop. He would hunt them across the stars if he had to. Ethan studied Kaia, the weight in her expression. You never really thought we'd win back there, did you? Kaia's gaze flicked to him. No, she admitted. Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Well, at least you're honest about it. She turned back to the navigation screen, setting coordinates for the next jump. I wasn't planning on surviving this long. Ethan frowned. What does that mean? Kaia didn't answer. Instead, She activated the comms. A new voice crackled through the speakers, gravelly, familiar. Kaia? Damn, I thought you were dead. Kaia's lips twitched. Miss me, Jax. Ethan raised a brow. Who the hell is Jax? Kaia smirked slightly. An old friend. Jax's voice was laced with amusement. Looks like you've got a human tagging along. You in trouble? Kaia's eyes darkened. Not yet. Ethan sighed. I don't like the sound of that. Kaia turned to him, her expression unreadable. The Dominion will never stop hunting me, she said quietly. And now, they'll come for you too. Ethan's jaw tightened. He had known that the second he pulled her off those train tracks. He didn't regret it. What's the plan then? He asked. Kaia studied him for a long moment. Then she turned back to the controls, her fingers moving with purpose. We fight, she said. The ship surged forward, disappearing into the void. The ship lurched out of hyperspace, emerging into the black void above a desolate planet. Below them, a vast canyon system stretched for miles, jagged ridges carved into the dusty surface by centuries of relentless winds. Ethan exhaled, shaking off the last remnants of the hyperspace jump. Tell me we're not just stopping here for sightseeing. Kaia's hands were steady on the controls, her violet eyes scanning the readings. We need to regroup. Jax is expecting us. Ethan rubbed his face, exhaustion creeping into his bones. I'm starting to get the feeling this Jax guy isn't just an old friend. Kaia smirked. He's the only one I trust to help us fight Rian. Ethan frowned, staring out at the wasteland below. What kind of help are we talking about? Kaia's expression turned unreadable. The kind that starts wars. The comms crackled, and Jax's voice filled the cockpit. You're late, Kaia. Kaia rolled her eyes. Nice to hear your voice too, Jax. Jax's voice was laced with dry amusement. Bring that ship down. You've stirred up quite the storm, and we've got a lot to talk about. Kaia set the ship on a descent course. The engines hummed low as they cut through the planet's thin atmosphere. Ethan tightened his harness. I've got a bad feeling about this. Kaia's grip on the throttle tightened. Get used to it. The ship touched down in a hidden base carved into the canyon walls. Jagged rock formations shielded the landing zone from orbital scans, and clusters of rusted ships sat parked along the ridge, a graveyard of old war machines. Ethan stepped off the ramp, his boots crunching against dry stone. The air smelled of burnt fuel and dust. A group of heavily armed figures emerged from the shadows, their weapons drawn. Ethan tensed. Friendly welcome. Kaia raised a hand, unfazed. Stand down. Where's Jax? One of the soldiers smirked and jerked his chin toward a towering figure in the distance. Jax stood on the edge of the ridge, his broad frame silhouetted against the dying sun. His scarred face and mechanical arm gleamed in the fading light. Well, he said, turning toward them. His sharp gaze flicked to Ethan. You must be the human who pulled Kaia's ass out of the fire. Ethan crossed his arms. That's me. And you must be the guy who starts wars. Jax chuckled. Depends on the day. Kaia stepped forward. We don't have time for jokes. Rian's hunting us. We need firepower, resources, a way to hit him before he hits us. Jax's smirk faded. He crossed his arms, considering her words. You know what you're asking, Kaia? This isn't just a fight. His voice lowered. This is war. Kaia's violet eyes burned. It already was. Jax studied her for a long moment. Then he exhaled. Fine, he said. We fight. Ethan felt the shift in the air. This was bigger than a personal vendetta. This was the beginning of a revolution. The war room was dimly lit, the air thick with tension. A holographic map of the Dominion citadel flickered in the center, its cold blue light casting jagged shadows against the walls. Jax leaned against the table, his mechanical fingers tapping absently. The Dominion is already mobilizing. Rian's fleet is moving fast. He won't let you disappear, Kaia. Kaia nodded. Then we don't give him the chance. We strike first. Ethan raised an eyebrow. And how exactly do we do that? The guy's got an army, a fortress, and enough firepower to wipe out half the system. Jax smirked. That's why we steal his fleet. Ethan blinked. I'm sorry, what? Kaia's lips curled slightly. Rian keeps his warships docked at a secondary base, far from the citadel, lightly guarded compared to his main forces. If we take it, we cripple his ability to chase us. Jax nodded. It's risky, but it's our best shot. Ethan sighed. Let me guess. You already have a plan. Kaia's eyes glinted. Of course. The stolen Dominion strike ship tore through the night sky, silent and swift. The stars stretched wide around them, the void endless. Kaia sat at the controls, her expression unreadable. Jax stood beside her, adjusting the forged clearance codes. Ethan leaned against the bulkhead. So let me get this straight. We're just going to stroll into Rian's shipyard, hack their systems, and steal a fleet right out from under his nose. Jax grinned. Exactly. Ethan sighed. This is the dumbest plan I've ever been part of. Kaia smirked. Welcome to my life. The ship's comms crackled. A Dominion checkpoint was hailing them. Kaia inhaled slowly. Then she activated the transmission. This is Dominion Strike Craft Zeta 4 requesting clearance for docking. A long pause. Then, Zeta 4, clearance granted. Proceed to Bay 9. Ethan exhaled. I can't believe that actually worked. Kaia didn't respond. She guided the ship toward the docking platform, their stolen clearance codes holding, for now. As they approached, the warship loomed ahead, its docking bays stretching wide. Ethan's stomach twisted. This was either going to be the greatest heist in history, or the last mistake they ever made. The strike ship settled onto the docking bay with a low hiss. The moment the ramp lowered, Kaia moved. The Dominion officers barely had time to react before she took them down. Silent, efficient, deadly. Jax and Ethan followed, clearing the corridor before alarms could sound. Kaia pulled up a holomap. We need to disable the hangar locks before they realize what's happening. Ethan smirked. So where's the big red button that says steal entire fleet? Jax grinned. Right this way. They moved through the station, avoiding security patrols, silently taking out guards. Ethan had to admit, Kaia was terrifyingly good at this. They reached the control room. Kaia hacked into the system, her fingers flying over the console. Then, unauthorized access detected. The alarms blared. Jax cursed. We're out of time. Kaia's eyes flickered with frustration. Almost there, just a few more seconds. The doors burst open, and standing there, flanked by Dominion soldiers, was Rian. His golden eyes gleamed. You really thought you could steal from me, sister? Ethan's grip tightened on his blaster. Rian smirked. You always were a disappointment. Kaia's violet eyes burned with fury. She reached for her blade. No more running, she said. Then she attacked. Kaia lunged, her blade flashing through the dim light of the control room. Rian was ready. He sidestepped, his own serrated dagger cutting toward her ribs. Kaia twisted, barely avoiding the strike. The air between them burned with tension. This wasn't just a battle. This was personal. Ethan raised his blaster. Any objections if I shoot him? Kaia gritted her teeth, blocking Rian's next strike. Stay out of this, human. Ethan sighed. Figures. Then the Dominion soldiers attacked. Jax fired first, taking down 2 guards before the others retaliated. The room erupted in chaos, gunfire flashing against the walls. Ethan dodged behind a console, returning fire. Kaia, whatever you're doing, do it faster. Kaia and Rian's blades clashed, the sound of steel against steel vibrating through the room. You always thought you could fight me, Rian taunted, his golden eyes glinting. Kaia's breath was steady. I don't think, Rian. I know. She slammed her knee into his stomach, driving him back. For the first time, Rian looked surprised. Kaia didn't hesitate. She spun, slashing at his arm. A deep cut. Blood spilled onto the floor. Rian hissed, stepping back, his hand pressing against the wound. Then, slowly, he smiled. You got better, he admitted. Kaia's grip tightened. And you got sloppy. Then the alarm screeched. Guys. Ethan called, dodging a plasma bolt. Reinforcements are inbound. I'd really love to not die today. Kaia cursed. She could kill Rian now, end this, but they were out of time. Jax, she shouted. Do we have control of the hangar? Jax slammed a fist against the console, bypassing Dominion security locks. Now we do. Kaia didn't waste a second. She grabbed Ethan's arm and ran. Jax followed, tossing a detonator behind him. The explosion ripped through the room, sending Dominion soldiers flying. Rian's voice echoed through the smoke. You can't escape me, Kaia. She didn't look back. They burst onto the hangar deck. The Dominion warships were lined up before them, their sleek black hulls gleaming under the artificial lights. Ethan whistled. That's a lot of firepower. Jax was already on comms. Kaia, we've got 3 minutes before Dominion backup arrives. Pick a ship and move. Kaia's violet eyes flickered over the fleet. Then she saw it. the command dreadnought at the far end of the hangar. She pointed. That one. Ethan balked. You want to steal the biggest ship in the fleet. Kaia was already running. You wanted a plan. This is it. Ethan muttered a curse and followed. Jax activated his wrist comm. Vesh, get your team on board now. A group of rebels emerged from the shadows, Jax's people. They sprinted toward the dreadnought, hacking access points and disabling security overrides. Kaia reached the docking ramp first, slashing through the last guards. She slammed her hand against the control panel. The ship's systems came online. Jax and Ethan bolted into the bridge behind her. We got incoming. Jax yelled. The hangar doors exploded open. Dominion reinforcements flooded in. Ethan dove into the weapons station, activating the ship's turrets. Let's see what this thing can do, he muttered. The first plasma cannons roared, ripping through Dominion forces below. Jax was already at the engine controls. Thrusters coming online. Strap in. Kaia took the helm. The ship rumbled beneath them, engines roaring as it lifted off the deck. Dominion fighters launched from the hangar to intercept. Kaia's hands were steady. Hold on. She hit the boost thrusters. The dreadnought shot forward, crashing through the outer bay doors like a meteor. Ethan grinned. Holy shit, we actually did it. Then, an incoming transmission. Rian's face filled the screen. His golden eyes burned. You can't run forever, Kaia. Kaia's lips curled into a smirk. I'm not running. She cut the comms and jumped to hyperspace. The stolen Dominion dreadnought drifted in the void of deep space, surrounded by the ragtag fleet of Jax's resistance. Kaia stood on the bridge, staring at the stars. She had won this battle, but the war was just beginning. Ethan approached, arms crossed. So, what now? Kaia exhaled. We prepare. Jax stepped forward, placing a data pad on the console. We send a message to every Dominion-controlled world. The revolution has begun. Ethan smirked. Rian's gonna be pissed. Kaia's violet eyes darkened. Good. She turned, facing her new allies. We took their fleet. Now we take their empire. The stars stretched before them, endless and waiting. The war for the Dominion had begun. The war raged for months. Kaia and her rebels struck hard and fast, hitting Dominion supply chains, liberating enslaved colonies, and crippling Rian's forces piece by piece. The stolen Dominion dreadnought became a symbol of rebellion, a rallying point for defectors who had grown tired of Rian's rule. But victory was never guaranteed. Ethan knew that. He had stood beside Kaia through every battle, every mission, every moment that had pushed them closer to the final confrontation. And now, as their fleet hovered above the Dominion citadel, the place where this had all started, it was time to end it. The Dominion armada was waiting. Rian had fortified the citadel, surrounding it with warships, planetary cannons, and enough firepower to tear apart a fleet. Jax's voice crackled over the comms. We can't win this fight in open space. Kaia's violet eyes were locked on the citadel. We don't have to. We land inside, take the command center, and shut the Dominion down from within. Ethan exhaled. So we're just gonna walk into the most dangerous place in the galaxy and hope we don't get shot? Kaia smirked. Exactly. Ethan sighed. Why do I even ask anymore? Then she punched the thrusters. The battle was chaos. The rebellion pushed through the Dominion fleet, fighters clashing in a storm of flaming wreckage and plasma fire. Kaia's ship tore through the atmosphere, dodging anti-air turrets as they breached the citadel walls. The moment they landed, they ran. The halls were a war zone, rebels fighting Dominion forces in close-quarters combat. The air smelled of burning metal and blood. Ethan fired down a corridor, taking out 2 soldiers before diving behind cover. How much farther? Kaia didn't stop moving. Command center is ahead. Then, a shadow stepped into their path. Rian. His golden eyes glowed, his armor scarred but unbroken. The Dominion soldiers stopped fighting. The air went still. Kaia's fingers tightened around her blade. Ethan tensed. Call off your men, Rian, Kaia said. Rian smirked. You think this is how it ends? You've already lost, Kaia said. Rian laughed. No, sister. You have. Then he pressed a detonator. The citadel shook. Explosions ripped through the structure, fire and smoke billowing into the sky. Ethan's stomach dropped. He's destroying it. Kaia's eyes widened. Rian smiled coldly. If I can't rule the Dominion, then no one will. The floor beneath them split apart. Kaia lunged. Her blade plunged into Rian's chest. For the first time, he looked surprised. Blood spilled onto the floor. You. He gasped. Kaia's expression was unreadable. Goodbye, brother. She ripped the blade free. Rian staggered, then collapsed. The Dominion soldiers panicked, their leader dead. But the citadel was still collapsing. Jax's voice crackled over the comms. Kaia, you need to get out, now. The walls buckled. Fire engulfed the corridors. Ethan grabbed Kaia's wrist. Come on. They ran. The citadel fell. Kaia's ship barely made it out, rocketing into the sky as the entire Dominion command center collapsed in flames. The rebels won. The Dominion was broken. But at what cost? Kaia sat in the cockpit, her blade resting beside her, her expression hollow. Ethan sat beside her, his voice gentle. You did it, he said. Kaia didn't look at him. He was my brother. Ethan exhaled. Yeah, I know. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, finally, we need to rebuild. Ethan smiled faintly. You're not taking a vacation first? Kaia's lips twitched. No. She turned toward the viewport, staring at the galaxy before them. A new future. A new fight. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't running anymore. The rebellion became a new force, a government built from the ashes of the Dominion. Kaia led it. Ethan stayed, because he didn't belong anywhere else. One night, as they stood beneath the twin moons of a newly liberated world, he looked at her. Do you ever wonder, he said, what life would have been like if we never met? Kaia was quiet for a long time. Then, she reached for his hand. No, she said. Ethan smiled. Neither of them were running anymore. And for the first time in a long time, they were home.